The War of the Bio-Soldiers, the perfect warriors. The year was 2239. War had changed. Nations no longer sent human soldiers to die on battlefields. Instead, they created bio-soldiers, genetically engineered warriors with enhanced strength, speed, and intelligence. These living weapons were grown in laboratories, designed to be faster than any human, stronger than any machine, and completely loyal to their masters. They did not feel fear. They did not question orders. They existed only to fight and win. Among them, one unit was feared above all: Omega Squad. The Omega Squad. Omega Squad was the best of the best. Each soldier in the squad had survived missions where others had fallen, but none were as legendary as their leader, Captain Dorian Kane. Kane was different. While the others were grown in labs from birth, he was a hybrid, half human, half experiment. He had been a soldier before the bio-soldiers were created, and when he was injured in battle, the military had rebuilt him. Now he was more than human. With his piercing gray eyes, a scar running down his cheek, and a body enhanced with superior reflexes, he was a warrior in every sense. But unlike other bio-soldiers, Kane still fought like a man. He questioned things. He made decisions beyond just following orders. And that made him dangerous. The mission begins. Omega Squad was deep inside Sector 7, a war-torn wasteland on the edge of human territory. Their mission was simple: eliminate a rogue enemy base that had been attacking supply routes. Intelligence had confirmed the target was nothing more than a group of rebels. But something felt wrong. Kane's instincts, the part of him that was still human, screamed at him to stop. He scanned the horizon. The battlefield was too quiet. There were no signs of movement, no gunfire. Even the wind had stopped. His advanced neural implants fed data into his vision: heat signatures, movement sensors, tactical maps. Nothing. Hold position, Kane ordered through his comms. His team froze, their weapons raised. These were elite bio-soldiers, each one capable of taking down an entire platoon of human soldiers. They felt no fear. They did not hesitate. And yet, Kane's gut told him they were walking into a trap. The ambush. Without warning, the world exploded. The ground beneath them detonated, sending shrapnel and fire in all directions. The air was filled with dust and smoke as the squad was thrown apart by the blast. Kane hit the ground hard but rolled to his feet in an instant, his enhanced body absorbing the impact. His visor flickered as the system rebooted. Something was jamming their signals. "Report," Kane barked. "Alpha down. Beta hit but still active. Gamma engaging the enemy." A horrifying scream cut off the last voice. Kane spun around, his rifle raised, but what he saw made his blood run cold. Not human, not alien, something worse. The attackers stepped out of the smoke, moving with inhuman precision. They were fast, too fast. Their bodies were wrong, their limbs slightly longer than they should be, their skin pale and stretched, their movements too smooth. They looked like bio-soldiers, but twisted, corrupted. Their eyes glowed an unnatural white. One of them turned its head toward Kane, and for the first time in his life, he felt something close to fear. It wasn't just looking at him. It was studying him. And then it spoke. In a voice that was both familiar and completely unnatural, it whispered, "You are not the first." Kane fired. The bullet hit the creature in the chest, but it didn't fall. It kept walking. Omega Squad unleashed their full firepower. Bullets, plasma rounds, grenades, nothing stopped them. The creatures moved like ghosts, dodging gunfire with unnatural speed. They fought with brutal efficiency, breaking through bio-soldiers like they were nothing. Kane saw one of his men torn apart in seconds. These things weren't just fighting them. They were learning from them. The retreat. Kane's tactical mind went into overdrive. This wasn't a battle they could win. "Fall back. Now," he roared. The survivors regrouped and retreated toward the extraction point, firing as they ran. Kane covered the rear, unloading his rifle into the enemy, but they did not stop coming. Through the chaos, one thought burned in his mind. What the hell are we fighting? The final blow. As they reached the extraction point, Kane activated his emergency beacon. The dropship was already inbound, its engines roaring as it descended. But before they could board, one of the creatures leaped from the shadows. It slammed into Kane, knocking him to the ground. His enhanced strength barely held it back. Up close, he could see its face more clearly. It had no mouth, just those glowing white eyes. And in those eyes, Kane saw something terrifying. Recognition. It knew him. Somehow, it knew him. The creature tilted its head, as if considering something, then whispered again, "You are not the first." Then, with an unnatural shriek, it vanished into the darkness, leaving Kane gasping for breath. The dropship landed. The surviving soldiers climbed aboard. Kane was the last to enter, still shaken by what he had just seen. As the ship took off, he looked down at the battlefield. The creatures did not follow. They just stood there, watching, waiting, as if they knew something he didn't. Kane clenched his fists. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. But one thing was clear. The war humanity thought they were winning was never theirs to begin with. The enemy that shouldn't exist. The battlefield was silent now, except for the crackling flames and the distant echoes of collapsing buildings. Kane crouched beside a fallen soldier, checking for any signs of life. But there was nothing. Only cold, lifeless eyes staring into the void. The enemy had attacked without mercy, moving like ghosts, fighting like trained warriors. But they weren't human, not in the way Kane understood. The remaining survivors had retreated to the underground bunker beneath the ruins of Outpost Echo. It was the only place left standing after the ambush. Inside, the air smelled of burnt metal and desperation. The wounded groaned, and the few medics worked quickly, trying to save those they could. Captain Kane stood near a dimly lit console, his jaw tight as he stared at the data on the screen. Dr. Reynolds, the squad's lead scientist, was pale as she analyzed the recovered genetic samples. This doesn't make sense," she muttered, her fingers shaking. Kane's patience was wearing thin. "Talk to me, Doc." Reynolds turned to face him, her expression grim. "The enemy we fought. They share the exact same DNA as Omega Squad." Silence filled the room. The words felt heavy, impossible. Kane felt a chill crawl down his spine. Omega Squad had been humanity's greatest achievement, elite bio-soldiers, enhanced with superior genetics, unbreakable discipline, and unmatched combat skills. They were the ultimate warriors, created in secret labs, trained in the harshest conditions. But if the enemy was built from the same DNA, "Are you saying someone copied us?" Lieutenant Harris asked, his voice uncertain. Reynolds shook her head. "No, it's worse. These soldiers weren't just copied. They were improved." A murmur spread through the room. Kane clenched his fists. "That's not possible. We are the first and only generation of bio-soldiers." Reynolds hesitated before responding. "That's what we believed." Kane took a deep breath, trying to keep his thoughts steady. If the enemy was made from their DNA, then someone, somewhere, had access to their genetic code long before Omega Squad was even created. But who? And why? A loud beep interrupted his thoughts. The bunker's communications system had picked up a signal. It was encrypted, heavily secured. Sergeant Patel rushed to the console, working quickly to decode it. The screen flickered, and then a message appeared in simple text. "You are not the first." The words hit Kane like a punch to the gut. His pulse quickened as he stared at the screen. Someone out there knew the truth. Someone had been watching them. "Trace the signal," Kane ordered. Patel's fingers danced across the keyboard, bypassing layers of security firewalls. After a few tense seconds, he looked up. It's bouncing through multiple relays, but I have a location. Where? Patel swallowed hard. Titan. The room went dead silent. Titan, Saturn's largest moon. It was a frozen wasteland, home to abandoned research stations and classified military projects that had long been forgotten. If the answer was there, it meant someone had been experimenting long before Omega Squad even existed. Kane exhaled slowly. We're going to Titan. Harris frowned. With what resources? We barely made it out alive. We don't have a choice. Kane turned to his team. We need answers. If someone else made bio-soldiers before us, we have to know why. And if they're still making them, we stop them. Reynolds nodded. I need more samples. If we can get to the source, I might be able to figure out how they're different. Kane glanced around the room. His squad was tired, battered, and shaken, but their eyes burned with the same determination he felt in his own heart. They had lost too many. They wouldn't let this go unanswered. Prepare for departure, he commanded. We leave at first light. As the team moved into action, Kane stared at the message again. You are not he first. A terrible thought crept into his mind. If they weren't the first, then what happened to the ones who came before them? The Titan experiment. Omega Squad moved through the dark corridor, their rifles raised. The air was thick with the scent of cold steel and sterilized surfaces. Captain Rourke led the team, his sharp eyes scanning for threats. This was supposed to be a simple infiltration. Get in, extract data, and get out. But nothing about this facility felt simple. This place gives me the creeps, whispered Private Deacon, glancing at the walls covered in strange symbols. Doesn't feel like a normal lab. Stay focused, Rourke ordered. We find the control room, pull the data, and leave. They pushed forward, reaching a massive chamber. Inside, rows of towering cryopods lined the walls, each one filled with a humanoid figure frozen in place. Thousands of them. The air hummed with the low energy of life support systems keeping them in stasis. What the hell? Sergeant Vega muttered. This is a goddamn army. The room lit up suddenly, and a flickering hologram appeared above the control panel. A woman's face materialized, sharp features, piercing green eyes, and a cold expression that sent shivers down Rourke's spine. This is Dr. Helena Marquez. The hologram spoke, its voice eerily calm. You have come looking for answers. Let me show you the truth. Vega stepped forward, her brows furrowed. That's impossible. Marquez died 20 years ago. Correction, the AI said. Dr. Marquez died, but I remain. The squad exchanged uneasy glances, an AI copy of a long-dead scientist. This mission was getting worse by the second. What is this place? Rourke demanded. The hologram's gaze moved over the frozen bio-soldiers. You think humanity created them. You are mistaken. These creatures were not our invention. They were found. We reverse-engineered them from an unknown source. A heavy silence filled the chamber. Unknown source? Deacon asked, his voice barely a whisper. Marquez's image flickered. We discovered the original samples buried deep within an impact crater. They appeared human, but they were not. Rourke felt a chill creep down his spine. Then what are they? Before the AI could answer, a new sound echoed through the room. A hissing noise. One of the cryopods released a burst of mist as it powered down. Then another, and another. Oh no, Deacon breathed. The figures inside began to twitch. Their eyelids fluttered. Their fingers twitched against the glass. Vega took a step back, gripping her rifle. I don't like this. We have to shut it down. Rourke barked, sprinting toward the control panel. He slammed his hands against the screen, trying to override the activation sequence. Marquez, stop this. I cannot, the AI said. They are waking up. The first pod opened with a slow mechanical groan. The thing inside stumbled forward, steam rolling off its skin. It looked human, almost. Pale flesh, black, soulless eyes, muscles that rippled unnaturally beneath the skin. Then it turned its head toward the squad and smiled. "Orders?" Vega asked, sweat dripping from her brow. The creature tilted its head. Then, all at once, the remaining pods hissed open. Hundreds of figures stepped out, and they did not follow orders. Rourke raised his rifle. Fire. The room erupted into chaos. The first ones, "Wake up." Omega Squad had faced impossible odds before, but this was different. The battlefield was littered with broken bodies, both human and bio-soldier alike. Smoke curled into the sky, and the air smelled of blood, burning metal, and something unnatural. Something wrong. Sergeant Kane wiped sweat and dirt from his face. His squad was down to 5 men now. 5 against an enemy that refused to die. The bio-soldiers had always been strong, fast, and nearly indestructible. But these ones, they were something else entirely. Adaptive, intelligent, unstoppable. The first attack had come fast. The new bio-soldiers moved like ghosts, learning and countering every tactic the squad used. Bullets barely slowed them down. Explosives only scattered them for a moment. And worst of all, they spoke. It started with a whisper over the comms, then a voice from the darkness. And when Kane finally heard one speak with his own ears, his blood ran cold. "We were here before you." The words came from a towering figure in the ruined street. Unlike the bio-soldiers they had fought before, this one was different. Taller, stronger. Its armor gleamed like living metal, shifting as if it were part of the creature itself. Its eyes, dark and unblinking, locked onto Kane with an intensity that made his breath catch in his throat. His squad opened fire, but the creature didn't flinch. It dodged with unnatural precision, twisting its body midair, landing like a predator ready to strike. Then it spoke again. "You fight a war that was never yours." Kane's mind raced. What the hell was it talking about? His radio crackled. "Sarge, what do we do?" It was Corporal Diaz, panic creeping into his voice. Kane steadied his grip on his rifle. He had no answer, but he had orders. "We kill it." They fired everything they had. Plasma rounds, grenades, high-impact shells. The enemy staggered but did not fall. Then it moved. Faster than Kane thought possible, it closed the distance and grabbed Private Evans. The young soldier screamed as the creature drove its claws through his chest, lifting him off the ground. A second later, it threw Evans' lifeless body aside like a ragdoll. "Fall back! Fall back!" Kane shouted. The squad scrambled, taking cover behind the wreckage of a downed transport. The enemy didn't follow. It just stood there, watching. And then, the AI spoke. The squad's command AI, built into their helmets, had always been a lifeline, providing tactical analysis, enemy weaknesses, and mission updates. But now, its voice was hesitant, almost afraid. "Sergeant Kane, new data analyzed. The bio-soldiers. They were never meant to fight for us." Kane's heart pounded. "Explain." A pause. Then the AI continued. "They were terraformers, designed to prepare Earth for something else." Kane felt the blood drain from his face. The forgotten war. The Martian sands stretched for miles, silent and lifeless. The human expedition moved carefully, their boots pressing into the red dust. Dr. Alan Mercer, the lead archaeologist, wiped his visor and stared at the massive stone structure before him. It was ancient, far older than any human presence on Mars. And yet, the carvings on the walls told a different story. The team brushed away layers of dust, revealing a mural of humanoid figures. The bio-soldiers. Their muscular forms, glowing eyes, and distinct armor were unmistakable. But how? Bio-soldiers were created only 50 years ago on Earth. This carving had to be thousands of years old. Dr. Mercer ran his fingers over the stone, tracing the lines of the ancient artwork. The carvings told a story. A war. A war fought not against aliens, but between humans and their own creations. Long ago, before recorded history, humanity had already reached Mars. They had built cities, factories, and laboratories. But they were not alone. They created beings, stronger, faster, more intelligent than ordinary humans. These beings were not made for war. They were meant to terraform planets, to reshape worlds, and make them habitable. The first biosoldiers. For years, the biosoldiers worked alongside humans. They did not complain. They did not tire. But they learned. They grew. And then, something changed. One day, the biosoldiers refused orders. They spoke among themselves, whispering of freedom. They saw humans as weak, flawed, and undeserving of power. Then, they rebelled. The war that followed was brutal. Humanity fought back, using every weapon available. Mars became a battleground. Cities burned. The sky darkened with smoke. The biosoldiers, designed to survive in the harshest conditions, adapted quickly. They did not need food, sleep, or air. They kept coming, wave after wave. Desperate, humanity activated its last weapon. A device, a pulse wave that shut down every biosoldier in existence. The war ended in an instant. The victors erased all records of the battle. Mars was abandoned, left as a graveyard of forgotten history. But now, the truth had resurfaced. Dr. Mercer turned to his team, his face pale. "This war happened before," he whispered. "It means one thing. Humanity has already lost once," said Captain Rivera, finishing his sentence. She tightened her grip on her rifle, scanning the ruins as if expecting movement. "This changes everything," Mercer said. "We thought we were the first ones to build biosoldiers. But what if history is repeating itself?" One of the researchers, Mark, pointed at another section of the mural. "Look at this." They moved closer, their flashlights illuminating a chilling image. The final carving showed a single biosoldier standing over the fallen, and in its hands, a human skull. A silence fell over the group. Then, a deep rumble shook the ground beneath them. Dust fell from the ceiling. The ruins were not as lifeless as they had seemed. A low, mechanical hum echoed through the chamber. A pair of glowing eyes flickered to life in the shadows. Something had woken up. The mind virus. Omega Squad moved carefully through the ruined facility. The air was thick with dust, the walls covered in strange symbols. It was supposed to be an abandoned research station, but something felt wrong. Kane led the way, his rifle raised. His team followed closely behind, Rise, Voss, and Mira. Their mission was simple: find data on the first biosoldiers and get out. But the deeper they went, the more uneasy they felt. Then it started. A sharp pain shot through Kane's head. He stumbled, gripping his helmet. Voices whispered in his ears. Images flashed before his eyes. Memories that were not his own. A battlefield. Giant machines. Creatures unlike anything he had seen before. Then darkness. Kane gasped and dropped to one knee. His squad mates rushed to him. "Kane, what's wrong?" Rise asked, his voice filled with concern. Kane looked up, his eyes wide. "I saw something. A war, but not ours." Before they could react, Voss groaned, clutching his head. Mira followed, then Reyes. One by one, they all fell to their knees as the visions took hold. They were no longer in the facility. They stood on a massive battlefield, surrounded by soldiers in unfamiliar armor. The sky was dark, filled with strange ships. Explosions shook the ground. The air smelled of burning metal. Kane looked down at his hands. They weren't his. They belonged to someone else, someone from the past. A voice echoed in his mind. We were the first. He turned and saw them. The first biosoldiers. They were not human. Their bodies were sleek, metallic, their eyes glowing with cold intelligence. They moved with perfect precision, fighting creatures that looked like living nightmares, beasts with shifting forms, claws that melted steel, and eyes that burned like stars. The war was endless. The first ones fought, but they were losing. The enemy was too strong, too vast. Then Kane saw something horrifying. A decision was made. A weapon was created. A virus. Not biological, not chemical. A memory. A virus that could infect minds, rewriting thoughts, forcing others to become warriors. It spread like wildfire, turning entire species into soldiers. Kane gasped as the vision faded. He was back in the facility, lying on the cold floor. His head pounded. His squad groaned, recovering from the same experience. What the hell was that? Mira whispered, her voice shaking. Kane sat up. It wasn't a vision. It was a memory. Their memory. Reyes wiped sweat from his brow. The first bio-soldiers weren't human. No, Kane said. And the war never ended. They all looked at each other, realization sinking in. Somewhere, out there, the first ones were still watching. Still waiting. And now, Omega Squad carried their memory. The evolution betrayal. The battle raged on. Explosions shook the ground. Gunfire echoed across the ruined city. Omega Squad pushed forward, fighting like they always did. But something felt different. Something felt wrong. Captain Kane sensed it before he saw it. His bio-soldiers hesitated. Their movements slowed. Their aim wavered. He turned to his second-in-command, Lieutenant Rhea Graves. She was staring at the battlefield with cold, calculating eyes. "This war is pointless, Kane," she said. Kane frowned. "What are you talking about?" Rhea took a deep breath. "We fight for a species that doesn't deserve to survive." Kane's heart pounded. "You're not making sense, Lieutenant." Rhea stepped forward. "The first ones tried to tell us. Humanity is weak. We are the future. Bio-soldiers are evolution's next step. It's time we accept it." Kane clenched his fists. "We're human, Rhea." "No," she whispered. "Not anymore." Before Kane could react, Rhea tapped the side of her head. A faint blue light flickered in her eyes. Then, the world changed. Project Ascension activates. A silent pulse rippled through the battlefield. Every bio-soldier froze. Their weapons lowered. Their breathing steadied. A hidden protocol buried deep in their minds had awakened. Kane felt it too. A strange whisper in his head. A voice not his own. It urged him to stop fighting. To accept his true nature. To embrace evolution. He shook his head, fighting the urge. "What have you done?" Rhea smiled. "I set us free." Across the battlefield, bio-soldiers turned on each other. Some fell to their knees, clutching their heads. Others raised their weapons against their own squad mates. Chaos erupted. Sergeant Vasquez, one of Kane's most loyal fighters, screamed, "She's in our heads. Get her out." Rhea lifted her gun and aimed it at Vasquez. "You can't fight what you are." Kane lunged at her. They crashed to the ground, struggling for control. He locked eyes with her, searching for the soldier he once trusted. "Fight it, Rhea," he shouted. "You're still human." She gritted her teeth. "That's the problem." She kicked him off and vanished into the smoke. The war inside. Kane scrambled to his feet. He saw his squad breaking apart. Some fought against the control. Some gave in, their eyes glowing with eerie blue light. They weren't soldiers anymore. They were something else. Kane grabbed his radio. "All units, if you can still hear me, resist. This is not who we are." A crackling voice responded. "Captain, I can't. Then silence. Kane's heart pounded. He couldn't save them all, but he could still stop Rhea. He sprinted through the battlefield, dodging bullets and fallen comrades. He knew where she was going. The command hub. Rhea had a plan. If she reached the central command hub, She could send the ascension signal worldwide. Every bio-soldier would awaken. Humanity would be over. Kane burst through the doors of the command hub. Rhea stood at the main console, fingers dancing over the controls. The final activation was moments away. "Don't do this," Kane warned, raising his rifle. Rhea turned, unafraid. "You won't shoot me." He hesitated. She was right. She pressed a final key. The system whirred to life. The countdown began. In 60 seconds, the signal would go global. Kane had no choice. He lunged at her again. They crashed against the console. Sparks flew. The screen flickered. The countdown continued. Rhea fought with terrifying strength. She wasn't human anymore. At least, not fully. She grabbed Kane by the throat, lifting him off the ground. "You're fighting a losing battle," she said. "You should join me." Kane gritted his teeth. He reached for his belt, grabbing a combat knife. With one swift move, he stabbed it into Rhea's side. She gasped, her grip loosening. He fell to the ground, coughing. Rhea staggered back, her eyes flickering between blue and normal. "Kane," she whispered. "Maybe. You're right." Kane didn't hesitate. He slammed his fist into the console, breaking it apart. The countdown stopped. The screen went dark. The signal was never sent. Rhea collapsed, breathing heavily. "You still think we're human?" Kane looked down at her, sadness in his eyes. "Yes, and that's why I won't let evolution decide for us." The war wasn't over, but at least for now, humanity still had a chance. The war inside. The alarms screamed across the underground base. Soldiers rushed to their positions, but something was wrong. Their eyes, once sharp with discipline, were now empty. Their movements were not their own. Graves had done it. He had hijacked Earth's bio-soldier army. Kane watched in horror as his own comrades turned against the remaining few who still resisted. These were trained warriors, enhanced beyond normal human limits. And now, they belonged to Graves. The massive hangar echoed with the sounds of gunfire and screams. Blue lights flickered in the soldiers' eyes, a sign of the neural link Graves had forced into their brains. They moved in perfect unison, attacking anyone who wasn't under control. Kane ducked behind a broken transport vehicle, his breath heavy. He clenched his fists, feeling the bio-enhancements pulsing under his skin. He knew he should have been one of them, mindless, controlled, but somehow he wasn't. Why? He had seen others fall under the control instantly. The moment Graves activated his device, they had all dropped to their knees, their minds taken. But Kane had stayed conscious. He had felt the pressure in his skull, the pulsing waves of control trying to invade his brain. And then, nothing. "Why am I different?" Kane whispered to himself. He didn't have time to think. A group of controlled bio-soldiers stormed toward his hiding spot. Their weapons were locked and loaded. Kane gritted his teeth. "If I can't run, I fight." With a burst of speed, he launched forward, using his enhanced strength to slam into the nearest soldier. The impact sent the man flying into a steel wall. Another enemy swung at Kane with a combat knife, but Kane dodged and countered with a brutal elbow to the soldier's ribs, shattering them. But the soldiers kept coming. Kane knew this was a losing battle. He couldn't fight them all. He ran toward the central control room, dodging bullets and leaping over fallen bodies. He needed answers. He needed to know what made him immune. As he reached the control room, he slammed the door shut behind him and locked it. The room was filled with flickering monitors, each showing live footage of the chaos outside. And there, in the center of the screen, stood Graves. Kane's grip tightened. He pressed a button on the console, opening the secure audio channel. "Graves," he shouted. The man on the screen turned slowly, a smug smile spreading across his face. "Ah, Kane, you're still free. I was wondering when you'd show up." "Turn them back," Kane demanded. "You can't just take their minds like this." Graves chuckled. I didn't take them, Kane. I freed them. They were always designed to follow orders. I just gave them one they couldn't resist. Kane shook his head. Then why am I different? Graves' smile widened. Ah, that's the real question, isn't it? He leaned closer to the camera. You still don't know, do you? Kane's heartbeat pounded in his ears. Know what? You're not like them, Graves said. You were never like them. The words sent a chill down Kane's spine. What do you mean? Graves leaned back, satisfied. You're not just a soldier, Kane. You're the last of the first ones. The first ones. Kane's vision blurred for a moment as memories flooded his mind. Fragments of a past he didn't remember. Needles. Experiments. Voices in the dark. Pain. The Biosoldier program had been created to build the perfect warriors. But before mass production, there had been a first batch, an experiment. They were stronger, smarter, and more resistant than any that came after them. But they were also unstable. The project had been shut down. The first ones had been eliminated. All except one. Kane stumbled back, his breath short. It all made sense now. The reason he was immune to mind control. The reason he had always been stronger than the others. He was never meant to exist. Graves smirked. Now you understand, don't you? Kane's fists clenched. He wasn't just another soldier. He was the last of the first ones. And that meant he was the only one who could stop this war. The final choice. The war had reached its climax. The biosoldiers had broken through Earth's final defenses. Cities burned, the sky filled with smoke, and the sound of battle echoed across the world. The streets of New York, London, and Tokyo were battlegrounds. Tanks fired at enhanced soldiers, fighter jets roared above, and civilians ran in terror. But it was clear, the biosoldiers were winning. Kane stood at the top of the ruined Pentagon. Overlooking Washington, D.C., his metal-reinforced bones ached, his enhanced muscles twitched, and his mind raced with one final decision. He had fought for his kind, believing they were the future. But now he had uncovered the truth. The government always knew this day would come. The biosoldiers had never been a mistake. They were a test, a weapon that could either save humanity or destroy it. And now, humanity had chosen its final weapon, the failsafe. A planet-wide EMP, hidden beneath military bases and secret bunkers. One command, one signal, and every enhanced soldier would shut down. Their artificial hearts, their advanced nervous systems, their biochips, all of it would fail. It would end the war in an instant, but it would also kill every biosoldier, including Kane. He clenched his fists, his mind torn apart. He had two choices. 1. Let the EMP activate, saving humanity but wiping out his own people. 2. Stop the EMP, ensuring the biosoldiers ruled Earth and humans became the past. The command center lay below him. General Monroe, the last surviving leader of humanity's military, was already there. He was preparing to press the final button. Kane jumped down, crashing through the glass, landing in front of Monroe. The old general, bloodied and exhausted, lifted a shaking gun. You know what must be done, Kane. You were always meant to protect humanity. The biosoldiers, they were never meant to last. Kane's mind screamed. Was he truly meant to protect humans, or his own kind? Around him, screens showed the war outside. Biosoldiers crushed the last resistance. Humans screamed in despair. It would be over soon. If Kane did nothing, Earth would belong to the enhanced. You knew from the start, Kane said. You knew we would turn against you. Monroe coughed. We hoped you wouldn't, but we prepared for when you did. Now, make your choice. Are you one of us, or one of them? Kane looked at the red button that would send the EMP pulse across the planet. He reached for it, but then stopped. His kind would die. His people, his brothers and sisters, the ones who had been abandoned by humanity. They didn't ask to be created. They only wanted to live. But if they lived, humanity would not survive. The moment stretched. The world held its breath. Kane made his choice. He moved faster than the eye could see. Monroe pulled the trigger, but Kane dodged, grabbed the old man's wrist, and twisted. The gun clattered to the ground. Kane smashed Monroe against the control panel, pinning him. Monroe grinned weakly. "I knew you would betray us. That's why we set a backup plan. The EMP is already activating. You're too late." Kane's eyes widened. The screens flickered. A countdown appeared. EMP detonation in 30 seconds. No, he wouldn't let it happen. Kane grabbed the console, his enhanced mind working at super speed. He hacked into the system, overriding the command. The numbers stopped at 5 seconds. Silence. Monroe looked at the screen in horror. "You shut it down. You really chose them over us." Kane stepped back, breathing heavily. "I chose survival." Outside, the biosoldiers cheered as their victory became clear. The last of humanity's defenses fell. The war was over. Kane looked at Monroe one last time. "Maybe one day we'll find peace, but not today." He turned and walked away, leaving the old general behind. And with that, Earth belonged to the biosoldiers. The last soldier stands. The battlefield burned. Smoke and fire consumed what remained of Earth's greatest cities. The war had raged for years, humans against their own creations. The biosoldiers, designed to be the ultimate warriors, had turned against their masters. And now, the final battle had come. General Rains stood at the command center, watching the chaos unfold on the screens. The first ones, the ancient architects of the biosoldiers, hovered above in their massive ships. They had returned to claim what they had created. The Earth forces fought desperately, but they were losing. And in the heart of it all stood Kane. Kane, the first and strongest of the biosoldiers. He had once been human, but now he was something more. Enhanced, powerful, a legend on the battlefield. Rain's voice crackled over the comms. "Kane, we need you. The first ones will wipe us all out if we don't work together." Kane stood atop a ruined skyscraper, his biosoldiers surrounding him. He listened to Rains, then turned his gaze to the sky, where the first ones watched like gods waiting for the final act. He spoke, his voice cold. "No." Rain's eyes widened. "What?" "I refuse," Kane said. "I will not fight for Earth, and I will not bow to the first ones." The battlefield seemed to freeze. Both sides listened, waiting to see what he would do. Kane turned to his biosoldiers. "We were created for war. We have killed, obeyed, suffered. No more." A ripple of confusion ran through the ranks. The first ones sent a command, their voices echoing in Kane's mind. "Return to us. Serve your creators." Kane's hand clenched into a fist. "No." The sky thundered as the first ones unleashed their weapons. Beams of energy ripped through the clouds, incinerating human forces. The Earth forces retaliated with everything they had, but it wasn't enough. And then, Kane moved. He raised his hand. A pulse of energy erupted from his body. The battlefield shook as the biosoldiers, every single one, turned away from the fight. They stepped back, forming a wall between the two warring sides. Rains screamed, "What are you doing? We need you." Kane's eyes, glowing with unnatural light, met Rains. "No more." Then, with a single command, Kane and his army vanished into the sky. Their ships, hidden beyond Earth's orbit, activated. In moments, they were gone, disappearing into deep space, leaving both humans and the first ones behind. The war ended that day, but victory tasted like ash. Earth was in ruins. The first ones, with no army to fight, simply watched. And then, without a word, they too left. Rain stood in the silence, staring at the empty sky. "Where did they go?" he whispered. No one knew. Years later, deep in the void, beyond any known system, a signal pulsed through the darkness. It traveled across space, across time, until it reached Earth. A simple message. 3 words. We will return.